All right, so I'm going to show you how to construct a leg, simple ways of doing this. And legs are tricky for all sorts of reasons. Let's go over here. And this is this lovely, I think it was from 3D Scans. We bought some of their artwork for anatomy and stuff. But you can see if you take a look at those legs, they have to be pillars of support, and yet they have to be fluid and energetic. They have to support the body, all the mass of the torsos, arms, and hands, and whatever load we might be carrying, and move us forward. So both stable and mobile. So there's a very particular way things work on the body, particular engineering. We're not going to get too much into the engineering because we're going to make it simple. But we need to balance that need for stability to carry the load with mobility, a balancing act. So it's beautifully engineered. So first of all, we want to, if we want to show mobility, action, life, because we could make this kind of beanpole crude robot that walks around on stiff legs like the early Hollywood robots. But if we want to have them have life, then whatever structures we show, the structures that support, the structures that propel, those structures have to have gesture. They have to have fluid, watery energy, because that is life. Water flows. And anything that is alive is mainly water. And even some things that aren't alive but give the feeling of life are going to have that same watery energy. So we solve this simply, not easily in the beginning, but simply by whenever we draw any kind of structure, we consider very carefully if we're not going to make the sides of that structure curved, or at least one side of that structure curved, like say in a thigh, for example. If it's not curved, it's not going to feel alive. And in fact, you can do a fairly poor job on drawing the form, or even no job at all and just draw the gesture, and it can still ring true without great structure. So the gesture is the fundamental design line. It's more, turn it off this way, I guess. It's more important than whatever structure, two-dimensional shape, or three-dimensional architecture. So we want to get the structure of any body part, and especially the legs, because they have to show the solid column-like stability to hold all the weight, carry the load, and to move the load of the body and whatever it's carrying. So it has to have both structure and energy, the ability to propel forward. And the watery design is a design of life, but it's also the design of movement. Notice that a curve is constantly changing, evolving in direction, and so on. Let me move that away. So if we If we draw a particular structure, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the sides of that structure are curved. And even if we render that structure, we can make the shadow shapes curved. And notice then they can have a watery quality to them. And every tonal mark I make, if I make my marks down the long axis, they're going to be beautifully, in theory, beautifully rendered in structure, but also beautifully rendering the gestures. So, in theory, every single mark we make can be both beautifully gestural and powerfully structural. But we've got to have some of that energy in there. It's going to feel like a mannequin. How much is up to you. And we might well make one side curved and the other side straight. And it doesn't have to be three-dimensional and beautifully, accurately, realistically rendered. Pretend that drawing was all those things. It can be very simplified. And you can vary it. You can make the curvature asymmetrical. You can give no curve on one side and a lot of curve on the other. Or one curve on one side and an S curve on the other, or even a compound curve, depending. So, and every structure I put in, anatomical or otherwise, can add to the curvature of the greater whole. And especially if we are making our marks go down the long axis. In some way or another. And if they don't go along the long axis, bring them back into the longest possible axis. So with that in mind, let's take a look at the legs. If I look at it from a profile, we're going to find that the legs, one of the mistakes folks who are just beginning make is they'll learn to draw we'll draw a female here, but it would be true on the male. They learn to draw hips maybe, or they buy those little art store-bought mannequins, and they do one of two things. They'll actually leave space. Walt Reed, I have great respect for the man. I met him once. He had a wonderful illustration store, but his how-to shows you the disconnected mannequin. All the body parts are bumping or floating against each other. And the problem with that is our number one job as artists is to show the connection. How warm fits beautifully with cool colors, how light fits beautifully with shadow, foreground with background, organic with architectural. And if we don't show the connection, we're missing out on doing our job in some sense. So we don't want to float our body parts, although it's a lot easier, or even touch them like we're stacking boxes. I don't want to go there. Like we've got boxes waiting to be picked up by the the delivery man. We want to interconnect those. So the legs don't fit at the bottom. They come in, here's the bottom of the pelvis. Here's the top of the pelvis, around the belly button, more or less. It's fitting at the middle, or it feels like it's going all the way to the top, which it does actually. It can kink at the middle or start at the top. So when I start the legs, I want to start the legs ideally at the top. In this case, coming off the tendon of the rector femoris, the central quadricep muscle, but we don't need to know that. So it can come off as an S curve, or you can just say, I'm going to fall about halfway down the hips. Doesn't have to be exact. And then I'll start it here. So if we thought of it, we don't really necessarily want to cut it off there, but if you think of it like so. Notice if we bend the leg and go up thigh high, again, we're somewhere around the top or the middle. And when I draw the sides, I want them to be curved, but not necessarily symmetrically curved, because limbs are all asymmetrical. The torso, the neck, and the head, if we're straight on a front view or back view, are symmetrical. So then what we do on one side, we're likely to do on the other. And that would be true on the outside of her left leg and the outside of her right leg, give or take a asymmetry in a strong and weak leg or something like that. So anyway, we want to make sure we start up in that middle area. And then our goal is to show some curvature with whatever shape or whatever form we're choosing to draw. We've got a lot of stuff going on here, so let's get rid of that. So whether I'm drawing that shape or that form, two-dimensional shape, three-dimensional form, maybe this all just drops off into shadow, so we don't see any form except right up here. So all sorts of possibilities. So I want to try and practice drawing these beautifully curved forms. And then there's several connective strategies, the way the body parts come together, generally the jointed parts, but any of the parts come together. But the easiest way is if the parts are in an alignment, meaning they're going in generally the same direction. They usually connect on a curve or a series of curves. If they're going in distinctly different directions, they'll connect on a corner or a series of corners. So if we take have that leg highly articulated. Now notice it's connecting on two corners there. If it's not quite so highly articulated, generally if it's greater than a 90 degree, it's one corner. If it's tighter than a 90 degree, it's two corners, or else it's going to come to a point. We don't want to do that. So we use two corners to bump around the thickness of the thigh before we hit into that thickness of the calf, like so. So you want to play with these things, and I'll even trace over them at times, usually now just to work with my clients, my students, but I used to do it a bunch because it's super useful. It's not what let's see here. There we go. So if we look at Eve here, let's see. We want to get as much curve as we can. Now here's the problem. If I get as much curve as I can, it's going to look like spaghetti. It's going to look wobbly. If I make it all straights and corners, it's going to look like a Lego woman. No life, all architecture. So we need to balance it. And depending on your tastes, your developing skills, your influences, you might get a little or a lot stiffer in your architecture, or you might get a lot more fluid in the way you draw those figures. So it can vary. It can vary. I was going to look for some artwork, but I don't want to take the time. So let's get rid of this. So we want to get them as curved as we want, but we want to make it as accurate maybe as we see. So when I look at the inside of this thigh, it looks like it has a lovely S curve on the outside. And pretty straight on the inside, although there's little subtle curves, but it feels pretty straight. If I was doing a structure and not just a shape, I might want it to come towards me a little bit, and I would tend to make it come towards me more than I think it is, to make it a little more dynamic. And if I end up rendering things that seem a little flat, then if I overdo it in the beginning, it might end up closer to right. And notice how it beautifully connects with the middle, really going up here, the middle area of that hip as it hitches and bends out, and it feels very much like a drumstick. Or the turret with a cannon on a tank, some futuristic tank. So anyway, there's that. And then once you get those big ideas, then you can add those subtler ideas, the subtle contours and such. And then we have a bit of a problem here. because now we've got the shin and the calf, and it just kind of bends. And it's not going to be usually a very successful connection. So when I have two big body parts, if they have a nice simple connection, like maybe an elbow might have, relatively simple connection for me, and sometimes it varies. Something that's really hard for me might be easy for you and vice versa. Then I just use the old corner or curve strategy. But with the legs, there's subtlety here. They've got to be strong, but they can't be rubbery. They can't just wander. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in a little third shape. This knee structure. And I'm looking right here. I don't want to do that because I'm not on a layer. I'm going to look right here, and where the calf comes out right here. And they won't always be perfectly in alignment, perfectly parallel, but they'll usually be pretty close. I had a little off there. And then I'm just going to draw a little Coke can idea there. And that makes for a subtler connection. Now, off this here, I'm just going to draw, there's my little Coke can. I'm just going to draw the shin bone, come right out at this ankle bone, go along the contour of the knee, inside the calf, out to the contour of the ankle bone. It's a tough one. You have to go a long ways, and it's curvy. And if you make it too curvy, it looks like a wet noodle. Make it too stiff, it looks like a mechanical person. And to make it worse, you got to have a taper, asymmetrical curves, and they both come out to those malleosus or knobby bones there. Right there. And then we add on this calf with the other side. And what I like to do is you can just draw it because you've done most of the work with this big structure. That's most of the architecture. But you can just draw that, or you can think of some shape with the other side. Whatever makes most sense. We'll leave it there so it's a little clearer for you guys to see. So notice what I did. Here's one of the strategies I'll use all through the body. If it's stiff on one side, I'm okay with that, as long as it's not stiff and hopefully a little extra curved. And sometimes I'll give it a little extra curve yet to make up for the stiffness on this side, and then it balances out. It still feels curved. Or if it's fairly stiff, because notice it just wobbles a little and then swells a little and then tapers a little, it's fairly straight, at least up in here. So if it's too straight on the constructed or contoured edge, then I'll break into the contour to get my curve. And then once I have that, there's more to be done in these kind of situations, but that's the major construction, and you could just design the shadow shape on it, or you could come through like an architect and find all the structures, the little structures that have the little bumpy light and shadow patterns. And do your thing on it. So that's the process. And make sure we're doing okay here as we talk together. Foot is hard. We'll do the foot some other time. So that's the trick there. If we see here, let me get rid of this. We look at that other leg. Now it's coming, here's the hips. Here's the center line, pubic area. Here's what we just accomplished over here. Notice how that side, because this is driving up in, it's squishing that. Squishing out there, so we're getting a fuller curve there. But this is going this way. Now this one, when we have the hips in alignment, not kinking against or breaking off dramatically in a new direction, but in relative alignment, this is going down in the right, this is going down into the left. Let me move this over here. We can see the full leg. Now I can connect them on a curve. I could also connect them on a corner if I really want to feel that mark, and then like a wood carver in the rendering, I'll round that corner off if I need to whatever degree. Now here, let's pull this back here. Here again, it's fairly straight, but we have a little bulge here, little bulge here. I'm just going to simplify that and give it a slight curve, and then I'll add the bulges on as I need to later. So fuller curve, although it starts to get pretty straight in that last third of this move here. And now I'm going to do the same thing I did on this side over on this side, but it's a different position. What I did on this side, if you'll remember, is I came down and came in and created that little Coke can idea. And you can take that as far as you want. This case, I'm going to take it this way. It's going to go this way in here. in here. And now I cut off here. I cut off the calf on the inside. I'm going to, again, cut off the calf on the inside here and come right out to that ankle bone. Right out to that ankle bone. Okay, just leave that, I guess. And then take off down, down. See if you go this way. Like so. Darken that so you can, or lighten it so you can see it. But we're not going to do those today because we don't have time. And then come back in and add that calf in there afterwards as just a swelling of the contour or a new smaller structure in that old bigger structure. And again, notice with its variations that you could design out. If I can give the let's do it this way. I can give that core shadow a curvature as well, then all is right in the world. And it can bump all over the place as it moves over these kind of sagging pillow-like forms. And the quicker I can move from going across short axis to coming down long axis with whatever tones I use, the better for my life energy that I want to instill my artwork with. And notice one of the goals, well, not notice, but one of the goals I have is I want my construction of that simple leg, give or take a secondary form like that bulging calf, to be as close to a simplified finish as possible. So I don't really have to do anything more to make the point. I can play with it all I want. I can say, well, now that I think of it, I think it's going to be more beautiful and more powerful if I make those shadows closer to the dark background than to the light halftone. So I might come over it and make my shadows darker, or better yet, draw the whole thing again. Because it only takes you 10 or 15 minutes, maybe even 2 or 3 minutes as you get better at it. And even if it takes you an hour or more in the beginning, you'll get faster and you can chunk down on it and just draw part of the leg and not all the leg. But now you've got the bones of a good solid leg. So let's stop there. We're a little over the half-hour mark. And we'll come back at some point, maybe next week, I'm not sure what I have on the calendar at this point, and do the back view and the side view. But the trick is when you have difficult connections between major body parts, bring in a secondary part. Having trouble getting the hips to connect to the rib cage, bring in the waist. You're having trouble with the hips and the waist connecting the rib cage, bring in the stomach. And then now you have a new form to make a more nuanced transition between this thing and that thing. All right, so I think that is it.